Hey, hey, mama said the way you move, gonna make you sweat, gonna make you groove. Greetings, bonhamologists. So today's video is going to look at Led Zeppelin's fourth album, their Untitled album, or Four Symbols as it's sometimes referred to. The album was recorded at the end of 1970 into early 1971. They basically used two different locations to record the album. The first location was Island Studios in London, where they tracked a few things, including Black Dog. I believe Four Sticks was recorded at Island. There was the early version of When the Levee Breaks, which they were working out, the track that's on the Coda bonus disc. It's called If It Keeps On Raining. And they also recorded Stairway at Island, most of it, I believe. But the other songs on the album were recorded at a country house in Hampshire, England, called Headley Grange, which, if you're into Zeppelin, you know about Headley Grange. It was a sort of derelict old house that was on property that was fairly isolated, so the band could have a good amount of privacy to rehearse and record. I guess the story is that Jimmy Page heard that Fleetwood Mac had been rehearsing there, and he figured since they could rehearse there without having issues with noise complaints and stuff, that why not be able to record there? So that's what they did. They rented the Rolling Stones mobile studio truck, which was parked outside the house and was available to them pretty much 24 hours a day. So with that environment, they were able to really immerse themselves in the whole process, not just, writing songs and then bringing them into a studio, but they actually could work through ideas, build songs there on the spot, and then get to work with tracking them. So that environment definitely, I think, put a character to the record that is really special. The fact that the band really had come into their own in terms of their compositional abilities, it worked out really well for them to be able to workshop like that and really delve into the material and not have the distractions of, home life or going in and out of a studio. So there are certain notable things about the album, the recording process. The fact that John Bonham's drums were delivered, I guess there was a drum set that was delivered to the house, and he set them up in the hallway, and they discovered through sort of a happy accident that the drum sound was amazing in the staircase of the house in the entranceway. So the engineer Andy Johns and Jimmy decided to set up a couple mics and mic his drums from that location, and the result is what you hear on When the Levee Breaks and on Misty Mountain Hop, which is just this massive, immense sound from the drums, but it's just so unique and distinctive sounding, especially with Levee, because he used an echo machine, an echo effect, the Binson Echo Rec, which gave it that slapback kind of effect. And the drums just sound massive on those tracks in particular. On some of the other tracks like that were recorded at Island, of course they sound great, but it's a very different sound, like on Black Dog and even on Stairway. So I'd like to just get into talking about each song and taking a look at Bonzo's drumming, and again doing some demonstrations of it. So I hope you enjoy this video, and let's get to the first track, which is Black Dog. Okay, so the first song, of course, is Black Dog. And Black Dog is a very unusual composition structurally. As you know, it's an odd time signature. I actually never figured out or even looked at sheet music for this song to see how it's actually notated, because obviously Zeppelin weren't writing out parts and notating them in a time signature. I think that this came about pretty organically. If you listen to the rehearsals from Headley Grange when they were working on this song, they kind of fumble through it a lot at the beginning, and then they gel after working through the breaks, the call and response thing. But it takes them a little bit, if you listen to those rehearsal tapes, to get things lined up. And as far as the counting on this song goes, I learned this song by ear, by memory, a long time ago. I mean, I was a kid, and just listening to it over and over and over, like most of us do, it just became familiar. But in reality, it is a tricky thing to sort out in terms of a linear, consistent beat to the call and response part, because you can hear the little stick clicks that, if you're familiar with the song, you hear a stick click often just after the band is playing the ensemble part, and then just before they come in. When they played this live, there was much more consistency to it. They had a pattern, and basically that pattern was they stayed within this eighth note tempo, and when Plant sang the line, no matter how he phrased it, immediately after he sings the last syllable, or, well, the last word, let's say. So like, hey, hey, mama said the way you move, gonna make you sweat, gonna make you groove. When he says groove, they come in right on the next eighth note. And that usually doesn't change when they played this live. So in other words, gonna make you sweat, gonna make you groove. So that's gonna make you sweat, gonna make you groove. So in other words, the distance is much shorter between that last word and when the band comes in than it is on the studio version. Because on the studio version, it's always a little different. Some of them are actually quite long, and you can hear the click. You're like waiting for the click, and then you hear it. So I can only guess at this, but my theory is that when they played this in the studio, Bonzo was clicking after every crash while Plant sings his line. They took most of the clicking out, but then had to bring it back up before the entrance. In other words, like this. Uh-huh, child, when you walk that way, watch your honey drip, I can't keep away. So, that's my theory about that. Now, as far as the beat goes, when you hear them rehearsing this, they kind of fumble through it a lot. And there are rehearsal tapes from Headley Grange where they're working on the song. And oftentimes Bonzo will play something, a different kind of fill. He doesn't just come in with the riff. He actually sets up the riff. He plays something like this. That's on a different part of the beat now when he comes in that way. And so you hear them working through this, and it's actually a really cool tape to listen to if you're not familiar with it. I'll put a little card post right here so you can check that out at your leisure. So the song was recorded kind of earlier on during the sessions for the album. It was recorded in December of 1970 at Island Studios. So I'm just going to play the beat a few times, and then I'm going to look at each section. So, of course, the main beat is, and I think of these as pickups to the one. So the one is the cymbal crash. So it's like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, ding. So that's 1, 2. Now, sometimes he plays double strokes like that on the bass drum, usually just one, so kind of like this. Okay, and then when it gets into the next section where it does the beat kind of phrases across the bar line. He doesn't change the 2 and 4, or the backbeat, I should say, but it runs through this odd time signature with that line. So that beat right there, I think you can see it from the overhead camera pretty clearly, but that's just... Now the next section features a little drum fill. That fill he plays often throughout his whole career, right? The phrase, but he phrases it many different ways. And on this particular recording, it's kind of hard to tell if he's going... Now I think he's only playing one bass drum note, by the way, not two, like he would often do in live performances. On the studio version, I only hear one bass drum note. So in other words, that's... So again... Now the thing that's a little hard to hear for me is if he's actually doing it on the 2 floor toms, or between the tom and the floor tom, like this. I'm not really sure, but it kind of sounds like it's one tone. So to get, super micro analytical about it, I'm not sure if it's or if it's. But the main thing is to get the gist of the feeling, and the feeling has that signature Bonham swing to it. It's not real stiff, and then when he comes in, the beat has this kind of rocking motion, even though it's a straight beat. It's not really a swung beat, but again, it's got that swinging sensibility in it. So here's the fill and then into that beat. Okay, and then there are some slight variations with the bass drum, especially as the song goes on. In the guitar solo, he's playing more double stroke triplets with the bass drum, like this. Another interesting thing in listening to this closely, it sounds to me like he's often just crashing one cymbal, and I'm pretty sure it's his 18 based on the sound of it. I've got old giant beats all set up here. He likely used his giant beats or maybe 602s. Sometimes I feel like the sound is very 602 on certain songs, like When the Levee Breaks and on Stairway, the ride cymbal. But again, too hard to guess at that without having any photo evidence. And there are really no photographs from this whole album's recording, either at Island Studios or at Headley Grange. There's just some photographs, I think, of them outside the house and you can see the Rolling Stones truck parked outside the house. So let's move on to rock and roll. I want to start off by acknowledging 2 iconic drummers who are really important to the history of rock and roll music, to the history of American music. And that is the great Earl Palmer from New Orleans, and also from New Orleans, lesser known, but a pretty influential drummer in the world of rhythm and blues and rock and roll by the name of Charles Connor. Now, both of these guys played on a lot of 50s rock and roll sessions, particularly with Little Richard and Fats Domino. Earl Palmer went on to have a very successful career as a session musician in Los Angeles, and he played on so many records. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with him, but if you're not, just Google him and look up his Wikipedia page for starters, and then find some articles on him. There's also a great book, I think it's called Backbeat, an excellent book on Earl. It's actually an autobiography of Earl Palmer. So anyway, the reason I'm talking about these two before I get into the nitty-gritty about rock and roll is they are both drummers who, when they played with Little Richard and other artists, utilized this beat. They basically innovated this beat. And I'm saying that with some degree of authority, although maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should assume that they were influenced by someone else that I'm not familiar with and that haven't really been spoken about much. Because generally when you go back through the chain and connect the dots with musical influences, you often are humbled to find out that what you thought you knew isn't the whole story. So, for example, when Bonzo played this beat in the studio, the introduction has been famously associated with the song Keep a Knockin' But You Can't Come In, which was a big hit record for the great Little Richard. I always heard that it was Earl Palmer, and I found out not too long ago, a couple years ago, I was talking with the great Stanton Moore, great drummer from New Orleans, who has an incredible online academy that does all sorts of educational work and analysis and demonstrations of grooves and stuff. It's really, really cool. Anyway, Stanton was the one who told me that that was not Earl Palmer on Little Richard's track, but that was actually Charles Connor. And Charles Connor played with Little Richard. He toured with him live. Earl Palmer, as far as I know, recorded with him a bit, but he was so busy, I don't know if he was actually touring with Little Richard. But regardless, Charles Connor played with Sam Cooke. He went on to play with James Brown and the famous Flames for a while. James Brown famously said that he's the one who put the funk in the beat. So, you know, Charles Connor isn't really talked about much, and actually one very kind of wild coincidence is when I started doing research on this just the other day, I looked up Charles Connor again because I wanted to know a little bit more about him. And I just discovered that he died just a few days ago. He died last week. I think it was July 31st. This guy, you know, he may have invented the double-handed, straight eighth note steam engine, you know, train beat that you hear on Keep a Knockin'. There's a short interview with him on YouTube where he talks about how Little Richard told him he wanted to have a sound kind of like a train, like a cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha. So he came up with this, he claims he came up with this idea, this beat. So, you know, when I think of a train beat, I think of it on the accent on beat 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? That seems to be pretty typical or common. But his idea was to flip it around and make it the backbeat while still giving it that chugging kind of engine sound. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you want to play rock and roll correctly, that's the beat to practice. And if you can't play it at tempo, which is brighter than that, it's a really good idea to just practice that as much as you can, for as long as you can, till you can build up the speed, like this. So if you can do that, you can play rock and roll as long as you can keep it up for 4 minutes or whatever it is. And you don't have to be religious about playing every single 16th note together. I don't think Bonzo did that. I don't think it makes sense for anybody to do that. If you need a break here and there, just take one. Some flexibility within that. But in general, that's the beat. And when you listen to Earl Palmer's version of it, let me think of a song. So there's an Eddie Cochran song, famous song that Zeppelin actually covered called Something Else. And that's the song that has this introduction. Right, so you're familiar with that song. If you're into Zeppelin, you know that was an encore that they played often, especially in the early days. It's on the Royal Albert Hall concert. Now that beat that Earl Palmer plays on Something Else, that introduction is the same introduction to Keep a Knockin' But You Can't Come In. It's the same rhythm. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So, the introduction to rock and roll, the introduction to Keep a Knockin', the introduction to Something Else, all start on the and of 3. And one of the things that Stanton Moore told me was that's an old jump introduction, as he calls it. And a lot of people call it, jump music or jump band, jump, jive, and wail, rhythm and blues. So you had people like Louis Jordan back in the 1940s that were playing introductions like this, their band, like on the piano. It's basically a boogie-woogie type rhythm. You've all heard it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Da 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 da. Okay, rhythmically, what Bonzo is playing is not the same as Keep a Knockin' or Something Else. A lot of people say he lifted it or he played it note for note. Untrue. That is not note for note. He may have lifted the idea, but that's how music evolves and is created. You have an influence, you take what you're influenced by, and you put your own spin on it. The introduction that Bonzo actually plays sounds more to me like something I've heard from rock and roll bands like Bill Haley and the Comets, or Chuck Berry. It sounds to me like a guitar intro that would go like this. Da 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 bum. Right? That's the rhythm. This is the rhythm Bonzo plays. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. That is not Keep a Knockin'. It sounds like Keep a Knockin'. And Keep a Knockin' was recorded by Charles Connor before Earl Palmer did Something Else with Eddie Cochran. So, in terms of the evidence, it seems like Charles Connor's the first one to do it. But again, these guys came up in New Orleans in the 40s playing rhythm and blues, playing jazz that had a very distinctive flavor, style. There's an exchange of ideas. It's a cultural thing. It's basically folk music. So, being as such, who knows who first played? It might have been some person that we never heard of in New Orleans or down in the Delta somewhere who played that before them. Whatever the instrument was, whether it's a guitar going, or if it's a piano going, that's all it is. It's just Zeppelin's good time moment in the studio when they were working out all these other songs, some of which were very complex. You know, stories are he got frustrated about Four Sticks. You could hear in the rehearsals for Black Dog that, you know, these are more complex songs. Stairway to Heaven is an epic. You know, they just wanted to have a little fun and blow off some steam. That's I think, the origin of rock and roll. And later on, the piano was added by Ian Stewart. There's tambourine in there. Now, in typical Zeppelin fashion, it's not entirely derivative. They do something really unique in this song with the form. And that is, the form of the song is a long bar blues. So, in other words, it's like twice as long as an average blues would be, a 12 bar. This is like 24 bars. It's long form. So you've got the been a long time since I rock and roll, still on the one chord. Been a long time since I did the stroll, that's 8 bars. Now the 4 chord, carry me back, carry me. So you've got this long form for the first verses, but then there's a half length blues interlude before the guitar solo. And of course that part is the da 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 4 chord. So pretty cool how they did that. They sneak in this, and that can be something that really screws up bands if they don't know the song. You know, and they try playing rock and roll. Everybody's got to know that that interlude is half the length of the rest of the form of the song. So went off on a tangent there, but it's an important tangent. So I'm going to play through the song just a little bit, the basic beat, the first like couple fills that he does and everything, and then I'll get to the ending and play the ending and take a look at that. So here it is. Moving on to the ending now. So the ending, I've broken this down before in other videos, but I'll just play it kind of slower than the original, and then I'll play it at tempo. Now, one thing about the ending is, again, listening very closely to what the bass drum is doing. When he plays those kettle of fish, I hear one bass drum note the first time, and then maybe 2 bass drum notes, and then it sounds like he's just doubling up. And I think when he played this live, he was usually playing. In the studio, studio version, he plays this. Okay, so let's look at that part again. So that's So we come to Stairway, and for Stairway it was recorded at Island Studios in Basing Street in London. It's an epic song that came together at Headley Grange. I think I should just demonstrate some of the main parts of the beat. There's really not a whole lot of complexity to the song, but there's a lot of subtlety. And the main thing about this song, to play it with the right feeling, if you're going for the Bonham sound and touch, is plenty of ghosting. He's doing a lot of ghosting, which he typically does, and it's quite noticeable, maybe because of the dynamics. It's not such a loud song and you hear it more. So for example, as he enters, the beat that he plays, there's a pretty good amount of ghosting, but it's a fairly simple beat. So this is what it is. Okay, so that's pretty clear, I think, what's happening. The little 16th note fills that he plays, those are pretty dynamic. He's not playing. Now, he may have done that live, just for more power kind of effect. But on the studio version, it sounds to me like he's playing pretty lightly. It doesn't sound like he's hitting real hard until the end. Like when he moves up to the ride cymbal, you hear a lot of that nice, fluffy, ghost notes in between the ride cymbal. A lot of this kind of thing. So by doing that, it adds a lot of air, or the sense of air, not necessarily air as in blank space, but like breath. Adds a lot of breathiness, and it just gives the feel so much more than if you were to just play. That works, but it doesn't sound as good. So moving along through the song, when it comes to the break, the fanfare, the guitar fanfare just before the guitar solo, sounds to me like he's playing that on one floor tom. simple enough, right? Just right with the guitar riff. But the next one sounds like there could be something more in there, but it's really hard to tell. So the next one is... Okay, so let's move along from this point to the guitar solo. All right, so that's the big fill, and I believe that on Stairway he played that with just one bass drum note, not like I think what he did on Rock and Roll was using the two bass drum notes after the... On this, from what I can hear, is just one bass drum note. Okay, so moving on from there, okay, so let's just take a look at that little variation of the beat that he plays with this. It's really like a, again, like a James Brown, like a Clyde Stubblefield, classic Bernard Purdie, that kind of thing with the ghosting and the accents in the left hand. So he's basically playing this figure. It's a little challenging because there's a lot of dynamic variation between the accents and the ghost notes, but it's just classic James Brown kind of groove stuff, sort of like the Funky Drummer. Same kind of thing. And that's really what makes Bonzo's feel so great, is all that funk and soul that he puts into the snare drum work and the bass drum interaction. It's just got so much of that grease, you know? And so from that point, we come to the end of the song. So that's Stairway. Let's move on to the side 2. Let's turn the record over. So next up is Misty Mountain Hop, which was recorded at Headley Grange in January of 1971. And supposedly Bonzo took delivery of a brand new Ludwig kit there and set it up in the hallway of the house. And they discovered, Jimmy Page and Andy Johns, the engineer, discovered that the acoustics were so great for the drums there, he decided to record his kit on a couple tunes right in the hallway. So the legendary story is he set up a couple biodynamic mics and hung them up from the staircase. And if you see the photograph, there's a photo, I think it's in the special edition booklet, but you could find it online, of the track ID for the session notes. You can see the multi-tracks all indicated, you know, guitar, bass, electric piano, the vocal, and there's only 2 lines for the drums. So I would assume that that means there were 2 mics that were set up in that hallway, and that was it. And the drums have a really distinctive sound, like they do on levee, where they really blend together, you know, and I'm not sure if he used quite a bit of compression. I think he did, especially on levee. But what happens is a lot of the fills that Bonzo plays on this song, they have a very unusual quality to them, because you hear the snare kind of, you know, rattling or in between. There's like a lot of breathiness again. Like, you know, some of these big fills that he plays, they're like these 16th note fills. And he's playing across the drums, but you hear a lot of ambient sound from the kit. It doesn't sound like isolated miking, obviously, at all. So some of those fills are kind of like this. And that's all just 16th notes. But the bass drum and the hi-hat are doing the typical Bonham engine type thing while he's playing the fill. Okay, so that gives it another dimension, you know, of fullness, and with the acoustical qualities of recording the drums in that hallway, it just gives a really huge effect. So I'm just going to play the beat. The beat it's pretty straightforward, just hard driving, rock and roll, heavy beat, but it has some similarity to me to rock and roll, the song rock and roll, in that he's playing often the 16th notes with the left hand as well as the right hand, although I don't think he's doing it as consistently. It's a little more occasional, like this kind of thing. So here's the main part of the opening of the song. He plays these big flam setups, and then we're off. Okay, so I'm playing it a little bit slower than the album tempo, just so you can kind of see and hear what's happening. Some of the other big fills that he plays on this song are, you know, for example, like this. And then as we get toward the end of the song, that last big drum roll fill, I used to think that he was playing that as a double stroke roll, and I used to play it that way a long time ago. But over the years, in listening to it more closely, it does sound like single strokes, and to me it sounds like he's actually playing within the tempo. He's playing like some sort of triplet roll, like, I don't know if that's 64th notes, but it's basically this. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, not too much of an accent on every quarter note, but you can kind of hear that in the recording when you listen closely. So at tempo, it's pretty challenging. So in context, it's like this. Next fill that he plays is a little hard to hear, but I think this is what it is. See if I can get it right. No, I screwed it up. Hang on. That's the fill. That's a mean one. So that's the tune. That's basically the tune. Now, when he played it live, he would play it quite differently, a lot more busy, a lot of big fills like this. A lot of those like 16th note with the bass drum double kind of fills. Oh, I almost forgot one important fill. There's the fill in the guitar solo. So that's... So those are just flams with the bass drum in a syncopated figure. 1, 2, 3, 4. But the snare drum, there's ghosting in there. It's not just... So that's like, great tune, just such a great distinctive drum part yet again. So let's move on to the next song. Okay, so now we come to Four Sticks, and Four Sticks is a beast. It's really difficult to hold on to four sticks and play them with that kind of power and endurance, and not lose your grip on them, because if you start really tightening up your grip to hold two sticks without sliding, you start getting tense. At least I do. And from what I understand, Bonzo was, what I've read, he was getting frustrated with nailing down the part because of the odd time signature, and it's just such an unusual song. So Andy Johns and maybe Jimmy told him to go cool off and maybe have a couple drinks and come back to it. And so when he returned back to the studio, I guess he had a newfound fire in his gut to get it done in one take. There's like a little bit of an intro that exists just before they record the take, where you can hear Bonzo sort of tapping out some things on the drums. He's playing a different rhythm. It's something. It's kind of like this. But that's that moment just before they count it off. Then you hear Bonzo count it off, and he counts it off like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 1. That's a really weird count off. I can only assume that he's thinking of it for the count off in 6. And those last two notes, the 2 and the 3, are pickups. And I've always thought that those are pickups because it's logical that those notes lead to the tonic. They lead to the 1. So that's da 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 da. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. I saw someone do an analysis somewhere, some article about the 4th album, and they had all these notes from like a musicologist kind of guy. And I can't even remember what he called this sort of polyrhythmic layering, but there's a term for it, and it just seems so excessively overanalyzed. And the main thing that I found wrong with it, or that I found fault with, is that they're saying that the rhythm starts on beat 1. So in other words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That doesn't make sense. The tonic is on the 3rd beat, which would be 1. Those are pickups. 3, so that would be 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. It's important to understand, I think, how this song lays in the time signature. Because if you consider those are pickups to the 1, it makes perfect sense when you get to the 6/4 section. This part. Da 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 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 da 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 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1. Then we're back to the 5/4 section. So the way Bonzo counts that off as 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 1, then the band comes in. That seems to confirm it to me that it is the tonic or the root of the song is on beat 1. So I'm just going to play what I think the beat is. It's basically the Bonham engine again. This. But I think he's often playing a flam on there. 1 2 3 4 5 6. So you see when that happens, you have a polyrhythm. You've got quarter notes in the right hand and dotted quarters in the left hand. So it's basically 2 against 3. And then when you incorporate that with the downbeats on the hi-hat and the upbeats on the bass drum, you end up with this. And again, with Bonzo, it's not always the same pattern. You know, I think he's doing a lot of eighth notes between the hands, and then sometimes I think he's playing open flams. And by that I mean, instead of, 5/4 section is basically a 3/2 subdivision of 5/4. It's 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1. Same like take 5. 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3. Okay, so the way that comes out in the way he plays this beat is these flams are accenting the 1 and the 4. So again, alternating between 5/4 and 6/4. And then when it gets to the more open section, you know, and the owls cry in the night and all of that, that's all in 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4. So that's it. Now, again, the challenge is really to keep your hands on these sticks and keep them gripped without tiring out your arm, because the harder you grip, the more fatigue you're going to get in here. One time when I made a cover of this kind of early on, I taped them together. And then I thought, nah, that's not what Bonzo did. You know, he just grabbed the sticks and banged it out. And then the story is he said, no more, I'm done. I'm not doing another take of that. So anyway, that's 4 sticks, and let's move on to the final song on the album. Okay, so that beat, of course, is the early first generation, if you will, of When the Levee Breaks. The song was originally planned to be recorded in November of 1970, when they first started doing sessions for the 4th album at Island Studios. And I guess Page's story is that he wasn't too happy with the way it was coming out, and he put it off until they got to Headley Grange, and then hearing Bonzo's drums in the hallway there at Headley Grange, the new kit that was supposedly delivered during the sessions, they decided to go ahead and take another stab at it with the new technique that Andy Johns, the engineer, had discovered of using 2 biodynamic mics that were placed up the stairwell of the hallway. And the song also features the enhancement of an Echo Rec machine, a Binson Echo Rec unit, which gives it that bounce back. So basically the bass drum, the first bass drum note sounds like 2 notes, but in actuality, if you hear the sort of unaltered version of the studio, like the alternate version of the studio, the actual studio take, I'll post a card link to that so you can check it out. It's really interesting. The song is actually slightly faster. It was slowed down, and it's there's no effect on it yet, so you hear the drum beat without that slap back. which is interesting, to hear. Sometimes I feel like I could almost hear, though, like a slight dropped second note there. So it's really hard to tell. But with the echo rec, it sounds like two notes. So where the beat starts like this, most people think that he, well, I shouldn't say most people. I think a lot of people until recently thought that he was playing. But then we found out that that was the echo rec unit making that slap back, so you hear that second note. The funny thing is the other notes don't really stand out as much. The snare hits or the other bass drum hits don't have as much of a slapback effect. So I'm not quite sure how that happened. But in that earlier version, if it keeps on raining, the song almost has more of like a kind of like a reggae sound to it, to me. The bass line sounds like something Jamaican, like a funky Jamaican reggae bass line. Boom, 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 boom. And that beat that Bonzo's playing, which is that's typical for Bonzo to play off the riff and add those hi-hat barks and a lot of bass drum activity. It's actually a really great beat, but ultimately it does pale in comparison to the studio version that they decided on, because that's just probably one of the most iconic drum beats in history, and it was all sort of a happy accident by discovering that sound in the stairwell of Headley Grange and setting up the mics that way and adding the echo. So I'm going to just play a little bit of the main beat and then look at what he does on the next section. He's playing some pretty fast, basically 16th note strokes with his bass drum foot, which is a sort of a carryover from the original version that they recorded earlier. So here's the beat. Okay, and now the next section, which features this fast footwork. So that's... So after the harmonica solo, you have... So that's basically when the levee breaks. There were other songs that were recorded for the album which didn't make it out until later. I think Night Flight might have been one of them, although I couldn't find any information on to confirm that one way or the other. I know Boogie with Stu was recorded at that time, obviously with Ian Stewart on piano again, and that was at Headley Grange. Oh yeah, there was a rehearsal for no quarter that's recorded, which is, I did a video on this before. It's really kind of a strange beat. The origins of no quarter, it's almost like it's basically a bossa nova type beat. It was much faster. And if you hear this rehearsal or outtake from Headley Grange, it's very funny sounding to me because it's this contrast between kind of a fast bossa nova beat, which is basically this. So it's like Page is strumming the guitar like dun 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 dun. Obviously very different from the version that would end up on the record. It's a completely different mood. So that was kind of interesting. It's really pretty fascinating to listen to the outtakes from whatever's available for whatever album, but especially for the fourth album, because there was such a wide range of material that they were working on, and having that house to be able to have a home base to workshop in full time like that, I think really was what gave the album such a distinctive, unique character. So I don't think there's anything more to talk about with regard to the fourth album for now. That's pretty much all the drum parts, and I hope once again you got a lot out of this video. I'm looking forward to doing the Houses of the Holy next, and I'm going to start doing some research on that album very soon. So once again, thanks very much for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel, and special thanks to all of the people who actually sent me donations for the channel. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the generosity that you've shown in sending the PayPal donations in the recent past. So thank you so much for that. I very much appreciate that. Thank you. And if you feel so inclined to make a donation to my channel and enjoy what I'm doing here, check the link in the description for my PayPal account. Anyway, enough of that. Hope to see you all real soon with the next video for Houses of the Holy. I'm going to try to get it done in a little more timely manner. And be well, be safe. Peace out.